essentially, we want to welcome you all to our first and what we're hoping to be a series of monthly MicroObservatory Mondays for YouthAstroNet veterans or YouthAstroNet educators who don't feel like they're veterans yet, but want to become veterans. So even if you never got a chance to implement the program, but you want to try again this year, these webinars are for you. So today we are going to have kind of a special treat. We're hoping, I want to give you a little bit of information about some of the youth survey results we've gotten from a bunch of people who've implemented the YouthAstroNet program. But our big highlight for today's webinar is we're going to hear from 3 educators who've implemented YouthAstroNet and hear their experience and get some insights. And I often learn so much from hearing from how you guys implement. So I think that's going to be great. We'll have a little chance for Q&A, and then that's a wrap. We'll wrap the next MicroObservatory Monday. So I want to, as a reminder, part of the research study that's associated with the program, we have asked you all to help facilitate your youth participants in taking a pre and post survey. This has sometimes been difficult. I know it's kind of hard to arrange, but it's really important to us in terms of both demonstrating that programs like this can have an impact on youth, and also adding to the general knowledge base about how different kinds of STEM programs young people in terms of their STEM career interests. So I just wanted to remind you of what the youth survey looks like. These are a couple of pages post survey. Probably might be small on your screen, but
oh, I can't hear you now, Mary.
Right, my audio cut out too.
so I can no longer hear you.
Can you hear us now? Our phone seems to be missing off the list of audio.
Our phone did dive off the audio here.
I can hear you now.
You're back. Thank you.
We're not on this.
Weird.
All right. Well, we're gonna hopefully we're back. If you can't hear us, please type right away in the chat box so I don't keep going on, and I'll appreciate that. So this is an example of the post survey. There were questions about STEM careers. These questions are really getting at, do kids see themselves, and do they think other people see themselves as science people? Then in the post survey, we have these questions specifically about what they experienced in the program. Do they remember doing a lot of requesting at telescope images, using the image processing software? What do they remember? And so I wanted to give you just a little insight into some of the results from a subset. We've had almost 1,500 young people participate in the program, but this is a little subset of participants. We've had a lot of trouble getting complete pre and post tests from everybody. I know, especially if you have a short duration program, it's tough to take 20 minutes at either end, but it really does help us. So this is just a pitch for that part of this effort. So in this subsample, we have 261 kids, this is their results, and they were in 30 different groups in 20 different programs. And what that means is some people had, 3 groups of kids at the same school all doing the program. So that would be 3 different groups, but the same program. Most kids are in middle school. You can see that we are somewhat reaching the underrepresented groups that the project aims at. We want to try to especially target girls and kids from underrepresented groups underrepresented in science in particular. So you can see we are kind of somewhat reaching those. And then the key that was of interest to me is how many different ways educators are implementing the program. So the duration is just a week, kind of an intensive week, whereas there's some who are doing the program over a long period of time, over a semester or something. Range, implementations, and you'll remember those questions, the pre-post results. I'm going to show you kind of just the average over all the programs of these 260 kids. And so these are a bunch of the questions, and here's the pre-post. And the thing you're going to notice is there's not much difference pre to post when you look at all the kids generally without controlling for anything. And in fact, unfortunately, a lot of the times the average pre-post of all 260 kids sometimes goes down a little bit. Now, it turns out I've seen a lot of research that generally in after-school programs with middle school kids, this is not atypical, because when they first start the program, they say they're really interested, and then at the end of the program, they feel like they've learned it, so they're less interested. So it's not a remarkable decrease in interest. But one of the really interesting things we found is that when we control for that question, a bunch of questions where students report how much they use the YouthAstroNet resources, so how much they use the robotic telescopes, how much they use the image processing, how much they posted images for others to see. So when we control for that, the students who report doing a lot of that have much bigger gains than the students who report not doing much of that. They actually are the ones who are losing interest and losing kind of having negative gains in STEM identity. So these are preliminary results, but the thing they do point to is that the better we can be as educators in really helping kids use these unique resources of the YouthAstroNet program, the robotic telescopes and the image processing and the opportunity to ask questions on the online portal of scientists, the better the results seem to be. But of course, those are the survey kind of quantitative results. We did ask kids an open-ended question, identify something you learned. And when we look at kids' responses, we identify 3 key areas where most of the responses are, and this probably won't surprise any of you. Many of them identify learning astronomy content in their response, and they say something related to learning about nebulas, or learning about the planets, or learning about something like that. Another big group of them learn something about telescopes, how they work, what exposure time, things like that. And then another big group of kids report on image processing and learning about light and color and image processing. So So we know there is a lot of learning going on from the programs that you're implementing. So that's kind of nice to see. And in fact, Erica made a word cloud of all the kids' responses to this question, you know, identify something you learned or discovered. And so here's the word cloud. And you can see all their things that they identified as learning about color, images, space, telescopes, galaxies, Neptune, photos. There's all kinds of things in there. So and the bigger the word, actually, the more it was mentioned. So you can see some of these themes of images and image processing, telescopes, and then astronomy content about galaxies, about nebula, things like that. So that's just a bit of background about what's been happening overall in the program. Again, we've had more than 1,500 kids across the country participate, and about 40 or 50 educators who've implemented. And we hope that all of you are hoping to implement again this year. So, McKenzie, the person who has to leave first? Okay, yeah, McKenzie, all right.
Hi.
We are going to have a few presentations from, as I mentioned, 3 of our educators. And Erica, why don't you introduce McKenzie? I'll let you.
All right. Well, this is McKenzie Ancona. She's a pro. She's actually done 2 implementations of YouthAstroNet in I guess what you would call kind of more free choice in-school learning time, right, McKenzie?
Yeah.
Oh, and you are muted at the moment. Oh, there we go. Want to make sure we can hear you.
Yes.
And actually, you want to take a minute with middle schoolers. You want to take a minute and tell us a little bit about what those 2 programs were. It'd be a great introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one I actually implemented after school, which, you know, tended to be, they were excited at first, and then you kind of saw that drop, like, oh, I'm after school, things like that. But the second time it was implemented, it was actually in school, and it was 6th through 8th grade, and we did it, we had on Wednesdays a short schedule, and so middle school decided that we wanted to help students kind of find their own interests. And so because I've had the experience of doing the Youth Astronomy Network, you know, we gave the kids the opportunity to choose to learn about that. And so the students that chose to learn about it during school, that ended up being a lot more engaging. And so that was kind of that second implementation, I think, went a little bit better because my knowledge base was a little bit stronger, and because those students were able to, I feel like, have a little bit more time to explore throughout a semester, and well, it was a trimester, excuse me, and they had a little bit more time each day, every Wednesday. It was a joint effort, you know, between the school and this program to make that happen. Yeah, I think that answers that first question for you, Erica.
Yeah, great. That was wonderful. So one of the things I think we found really great about your implementation is that you really took advantage of all of the different things we have to offer here at YouthAstroNet. And I know we offer a lot.
Yeah.
But you did a great job of kind of sifting through and finding some of the resources we think work well. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about the features that you found most valuable within your program.
Absolutely. I think overall, just having the support that you offered was amazing. So I'm looking, you know, at this slide that's up, and digital mentor. So first of all, having Joseph was absolutely wonderful because our students, the first thing I said to my students was, you have this opportunity to ask all the types of questions that you want, and if, you know, he doesn't know, he will find someone that does. And that was the truth. So the kids, you know, every time we met, I said, you know, today I would like you to at least ask one question. And we ended up getting quite a few good questions, which then we would talk about in class. The live Q&A was awesome, just because, you know, at that point it was probably halfway during the semester, and kids had started working on their capstone projects, which were actually individually chosen based on the interest after they were exposed to some different activities like the alien eyes, the different colors, image processing, things like that, you know, space, relative size, things like that. So having gone through that and then being able to ask a scientist face-to-face was pretty amazing, especially someone that knows so much, and the expertise was just very valuable to have for those students. And I think they were very impressed with the fact that the response that they got was very quick, you know. And then lastly, talking about the little bits. So I have here, you know, we did little bits twice. And of course, little bits are fun because you get to, you know, tinker with things. But I will tell you, the students really learned how to take those parts and how they function together. And they learned the complexity of how those things work together, how it wasn't just as simple, you know, if you have in mind you're trying to build a telescope, you have to figure out what pieces you're going to need, so you have to learn them, and they're complex. I mean, you know, they're simple to put together, but to make something work the way that you want it to and to do what you need it to do is quite the process. So going through trying to figure out what doesn't work, and then celebrating those small successes when it did work. So, you know, that really kind of, I felt like that's definitely the learning process, and they were able to go through that with the little bits. I hope that's okay for you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
And so let me get to the next slide. I wanted you to talk a little bit about the capstone projects that your kids have worked on, and you know, and how that worked for you.
Absolutely. So some of the kids were very fascinated by the fact of different color filters and what you can see and what you can't. And we talked a lot about, you know, the light exposure that you needed on each image. And so it was a really nice, especially for this age, it's nice to have the guidance when you're going to, you know, try to process an image or request an image, you know, hope that exposure time isn't long enough or it's too long. The kids did really well with that. And then they loved the different color filters and being able to, you know, put them together to get a true color image, right, which is still a little bit off. But they really enjoyed that. And so the picture up on the left was a student that had requested images. And he had put them in there, and then he put the different color filters in there, and then, you know, he tried to do them all together. So it was kind of his representation of explaining the different color filters and explaining that when you put them all together, often you get a true color image. And so that is what he had worked on. And what was really cool is that at the end of the trimester, these students got to show, you know, these projects. And so not only were they investigating themselves, you know, whether it was, you know, we tried to address misconceptions, but the fact that they were doing it themselves, learning it themselves, and then having to present it, that, you know, that made it a little bit stronger. And I know I've seen some other educators that have helped those students showcase their learning, which I think is absolutely important and necessary for them to become stronger learners. And then the one on the bottom right, a student was working on a telescope. And so it, you know, it wasn't necessarily 100% correct, but he was very proud that he understood a little bit of that process. And so I did want to mention that the student audience that I had was both students that were in general education and who had an IEP, so, you know, possibly a learning disability. And so for them to gain the successes that they did, even if it was understanding one part of, you know, a whole process, you know, that was important to them. And that was important for me to be able to see that. So I hope, you know, that's, you guys find that as valuable as like I did, even though, you know, you kind of knew there were some hiccups there. And you, like I said, you try to address those misconceptions as an educator who's still learning. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really like, you know, the fact that you both use the online tools to kind of show what kids did, that Joe was able to kind of comment on what they did, and they
Yeah.
got a little feedback that way. And so there's a lot of ways of building their science identity. So even when content knowledge, there's misconceptions, they're definitely learning, and they're putting together an awful lot of things. You can see the evidence for it.
Absolutely.
So I really like that. Does anybody have any questions for McKenzie about how she implemented YouthAstroNet? You can either type them in the chat or just unmute yourself. So I'm going to wait a second, McKenzie.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm long-winded at times. You may have covered it.
Well, if somebody's typing, we'll come back. We'll come back to you.
Sure, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
McKenzie has to leave in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, sorry. But
That's all right. We'll see you at future MicroObservatory Mondays. All right.
There you go. Annette wants to know what your group age was.
Absolutely. We did where I was at previously, we had a multi-age middle school, so it was 6th, 7th, and 8th, and they were intermixed.
Oh, intermixed. Oh, interesting.
Yep, about 12 to 14 students were in the class because I was the only instructor in there, and so when you get a little bit more than that, it's harder to address their particular interests, especially when they're branching off to do their individual projects.
Yeah, that is a tough thing, managing kids' separate projects for a whole group.
Especially because you allowed variety in their project, which clearly shows that they were excited about them when you look through all their posts, but
yeah,
it is a challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, McKenzie.
Absolutely.
Next, we have on the phone Chris from Montpellier, and he's from our Boston Public Schools. Erica, why don't you give a brief introduction to Chris while I get the...
All right. Yes, so Chris, as Mary said, is a local educator to us, which meant we actually got to work a little more closely and meet some of his students. They're at a STAR party, which he'll tell you a little bit more about. He ran a program in an after school, an astronomy club that I believe he ran all year, and I'll let him tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I don't have. I don't know why my camera's not working, but I hope you guys can hear okay. Yeah. My name is Chris Kamara, and I teach 7th grade science in the Dorchester area of Boston. And I used YouthAstroNet with my astronomy club. Now that's a club that we met once a week after school, and that was one of the limitations we had, because sometimes we'd be requesting images and then we'd show up a week later and we find out, oh, it was cloudy, so we'd have to request images again. Once that happened once or twice, the kids started going on their own time, because they had the logins to go and request more images so that they would have images built up. And I highly recommend that if anyone's planning a once weekly meeting, just to make kids aware of that and help them understand how to log in on their own. But yeah, I mean, my astronomy club used resources from a couple different places, so it wasn't like we spent the entire year just on YouthAstroNet, but we did come back to this several times, and the kids had a couple opportunities to present what they had, well, the work that they had done, and capturing some images and doing a little research at the end of the year.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit more about their opportunities to present their work?
Yeah, so you guys actually hosted us at one of the, I'm not sure, I guess the event was kind of like a Boston area astronomy event one evening, where a lot of different groups came together at the Bowling Building in downtown Boston. And you can see the picture on the right here. Actually, both pictures here are me with some of my students. Oh my gosh, they look so young in those pictures now. But they they, you see there's a poster. This is early in terms of us producing some images. And so these were more along the creative side, instead of necessarily trying to get the exact colorization of a nebula right or something. And so there's a cool picture of the moon, I think, at the bottom there, that was colorized in a pretty cool way. The kids were pretty excited to, I got to say, they were really excited to see their pictures on those poster boards up for display, and that really inspired me for the rest of the program. And then at the top left, you see one of my students helping some of the volunteers there log in and see what it's like to request their own images. At the end of the year, we had I asked the kids to pick one image that they were really proud of and do a little bit more research into it. And through Google Slides, we actually asked every student to make one slide where they had their image and they did a little bit of research about it. We printed those out, and those went on display at the end of our year in our school library. And so I think they're eager to get the next round of those for our library. It's nice to have a little display area. I don't know if anybody has display cases at the front of their school or just in the hallway or the back of your room. I think there's a lot to be said. I teach in an urban setting, and there's a lot to be said for the pride that comes up when students do work that they know that their peers aren't doing, and they get to show that off. I think it goes along with it.
Yeah, that's producing work and sharing it with others. That was actually one of those items on the survey that was correlated with kids' increase in interest and affinity for the science and astronomy. So that's pretty cool. Chris, I want to know, are you continuing to do this, and do you have new plans? Or do you
yes,
have any...
actually, yeah. Tomorrow afternoon is the first meeting of our astronomy club this year, and we've actually I started giving out a couple of the permission slip forms so that we can get kids enrolled in this again. I think going back to this for the second year is going to be, I feel like it's going to be hugely different, because now I sort of know what to expect, how the kids are going to react to this and that, and how to manage it throughout the year, and maybe do it in a couple different ways throughout the year, so that we can sort of see what's up in the sky at different times, and even process that. Why are there things in the sky at different times of the year? And yeah, I think the kids who did it last year are excited to come back, because I've got a mix of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I think I've been showing off some of the images to some of our incoming 6th and 7th graders that are just kind of inspirational, just to see that they can see this kind of stuff in the sky. I mean, one thing that, I'm not sure how many people in our chat today are able to look up in the sky and see the Milky Way, but the kids in Boston, when I show them a picture of the Milky Way, they assume it's Photoshopped, because we can never see that unless you travel to a place where the sky is dark, and which is nowhere near Boston. You just can't see anything like that. And so to realize that you can really see these things up in the sky, and understand, that you just need to collect enough light, and then looking into why it's not really possible in Boston. It opens their eyes a little bit, with something that they just assumed you can only see stars up in the sky. And I'll tell you, we had a lot of kids who were active in this program came to a summer event that we had at our school for the eclipse. And just, you can really tell that kids are paying more attention. I've had kids coming to me today, this is horrible. Apparently there's some rumor on Facebook or something about Planet X that's going to crash into the Earth and end all life in 5 years.
Oh, dear.
So, but at least they're paying attention to that, and hopefully we'll build their common sense about, how possible that really is. We'll build up that common sense soon, but at least they're paying attention to space stories,
Right. Yeah, that's that's great. Yeah, I like the that they have kind of access to the sky that they don't actually have outside their window here. So that's pretty neat.
Right.
Okay, great. Any questions for Chris from people? Thank you so much, Chris. And next, we're going to hear from Annette. Missed it in here. Sorry about that.
Oh, geez. That's my fault, Annette. I'm sorry.
Annette Eshelman and Erica, how about introducing Annette to our group?
Great. Annette comes from to us from one of our Smithsonian affiliate museums. She's actually works
the Springfield Museum of Art in Ohio.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully she's going to bring kind of a different perspective for us on how we can kind of incorporate art into some of our STEM learning here. And she's worked with a number of educators and implemented separate times. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about those implementations.
So yeah, I have, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Okay. I have worked with a local school, which was a long process of getting the local schools to work with me. That took about 9 months to get the teachers to be on board with a new kind of STEM learning in their classroom. So we did 3 classes at a local county school, middle school here. One with a science teacher and 2 with the art teacher who worked with a computer art, digital art lab. And so those were very successful programs. The science teacher was so excited. His hobby is astronomy, so it was a great hook for him to get this into his classroom, and he really wanted to create. He at this time was teaching a 9-week class, STEM class, and so we turned it into a STEAM class where he did the science education learning via the curriculum that was supplied by YouthAstroNet. And I did the art making and teaching the kids how to manipulate their photographs. We use those photographs as inspiration for paintings, both in his class and in the class with the digital art instructor. We chose watercolor for the science class because it was great for him to be able to talk about how different chemicals react to the watercolor medium. And so we used things like crayon resist, salt technique, alcohol technique. So that also built in a nice, more science for him to talk about, and a lot more texture for me to talk about with the children. So that was fun for both of us. And then with the digital art instructor, those students had been in the classroom, in the digital classroom for half the school year, and she was really anxious to get them back into the studio. And so with them being able to take their photographs, manipulate them, and then use them as inspiration for acrylic paintings was fabulous, teaching them that inspiration can come from anywhere. And here we see one of the students from the digital art class, excuse me, with his image that he took, and then he is working on his painting. And we also see the finished painting on the bottom right, which turned out to be a very successful. This is a 7th grader. The other images that we saw were my 3rd implementation with this project with the Juvenile Detention Center here in Clark County. That was in partnership with another arts group called Project Jericho, who takes art to kids and families at risk, both visual and all genres of art. So anything, theater, dance, music. So I was privileged to work with them. The girls did these round books that you see on the right. That's me with the girls. And then in the center there, the boys did books that were square. We put them in boxes. We called them a cosmos in a box. And so they were able to take those home with them. This was very successful for the kids' self-esteem. I worked with the science teacher as well here in this setting. She did a class without me using the curriculum that is supplied. She really loved the alien eyes. She enjoyed using the color filters lesson plan. Distance, she did the distance lesson as well. She added in some videos that she had found, and then I got them later in the day to work on the computers and learn how to manipulate their photographs. And I found that the girls were very timid about using the computer. Lots of kids in this kind of setting, low self-esteem, as can be understood, they are in jail. But the girls were very, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, not something I'm interested in, to, wow, look what I did. Everyone come look at this. Look at this. Look what I made. So it was even more successful than it was in the middle school, and the middle school was hugely successful. So very excited about both projects.
Well, that's a very cool result to hear, the increase in self-confidence. That sounds great. I really like the particular kind of products that you have, where kids are, have a reason to make their images stand out, because both these products. The thing on the right there, where you're holding up something, but it seems like the kids have, are those like contact sheets, or what?
Yes.
What were they doing with those?
So I was showing them the piece that I had put together, just as these are my images. This is the book that I made, and they had already chosen 15 images of their own. And so those were printed on contact sheets for them, and then they could either cut them out in squares and attach them to the book for their box, or they could hole punch them like in a large circle, and we did both. But they were the images that they took. They had an amount. They had to have 15 really good images in order to finish the project. They had, I don't know, lots and lots of images that we, worked through. One of the cool things also about this project is with Project Jericho, we enlarged 28 of the images, and they are being hung in the Juvenile Detention Center lobby for the parents and other visitors to come and see. And there's text about the project, as well as information about the images that they took, be it galaxies or nebula or whatever. So yeah, we also used the poetry exercise for all of the groups, both the art groups and the science group. It was very exciting to see. Not so successful with this detention center group, I think mostly because I didn't really have time to work with them. It was just a quick 6-day immersive project. So you can only get so much done in a few days, whereas the other group, I was there for a whole 9 weeks. So just a difference of time and what we can do.
Right. Great. Well, these were three examples of the program. I think each have you know, something to think about in terms of when we do our own professional development for the next cohort of teachers, making sure we have some of these examples as capstone projects. And so I really want to thank all three of you, Annette, McKenzie, and Chris, for joining us. I heard a couple of themes across all three being important, one being the capstone element, sort of doing something as a product of their work that kids share with others. I heard a couple of pieces of the YouthAstroNet curriculum come up. The alien eyes and the light and color filters came up a couple of times, and astropoetry, Annette just mentioned. And again, just as a reminder for those of you who might be hoping to implement soon, all the curriculum resources are on the educator portal, and we do allow you to borrow these kits of little bits for that McKenzie was talking about in terms of creating the subcomponents of a robotic telescope.
And actually, Melissa, who's on the line right now, also borrowed them from us and used them really successfully in her school classroom.
Right. Melissa, are you on audio? Do you want to comment on that?
Love the little bits. In fact, I find the girls like them even more than the boys. And when we built telescopes, and then I let them build some other things with them. And the girls always seem to have the plan, the most interesting and creative ones first. And we're successful first.
Interesting, great.
That's great to hear that they, weren't nervous to kind of come in. I know you sent us some really great videos of their rotating telescopes, which I enjoyed.
Yes, they really liked that.
So we're hoping to kind of stimulate people to want to refresh their knowledge about all that's available through YouthAstroNet and have more implementations. For those of you who might have been on earlier online workshops over last year, we really look forward to having you implement. And towards that end, Erica and a new member of our team, Harry Houghton, who's not on this webinar, but he'll be on future webinars, are offering live office hours for anyone who wants to ask questions, refresh your memory about how to use the telescopes, how to use the JS9 image processing tool, how to get the best images out of the telescope, what kinds of astronomy investigations can you do. Basically, if you just click on the Zoom link during any of those times, Harry or Erica will be online and willing to ask questions about any aspect of the program that you have. So we are going to have a webinar like this every month. And one of the things I wanted to ask you guys about right during this webinar is, are there particular things you want to know more about that we should focus a future webinar on? So if anyone has any ideas for that, we'd love to hear them right now, and feel free to unmute yourself to have that discussion. Arturo, anything you're looking for in the future as you think about implementing? Well, I will kind of start to end here by letting you all know that one of the things we will talk about our JS9 image processing tool, which hopefully you'll mostly be familiar with from your own use of YouthAstroNet. We've started to introduce some new features in it that make it usable for doing lots of projects. And one of those features in particular, a number of you mentioned recently having an eclipse event. I think Chris mentioned it, and I've brought into view now. Frank, our telescope engineer, spent all day on the 21st. There's Frank. Training 2 telescopes, one in Arizona and one in Cambridge, on the eclipse all day. And of course, neither place was in totality, but they had different perspectives from the north and the south of the line of totality. That's partial eclipse. And so you can find these images in the MicroObservatory Recent Image Directory. And oops, let me find that. Here we are. Let me search on it here, and I'll just, there we are. All these eclipse images, and there's a special directory for them too. And I think we've linked from the YouthAstroNet portal.
But those will go away.
Yeah.
Next week.
So where are they in the portal? We will show them right now.
Yeah.
So they're in our image archive, but they're also, I posted an announcement.
Well, once you find the archive, and we'll put it in the announcement, the thing I wanted to demonstrate was you can actually drag and drop images from the MicroObservatory archive right onto JS9. So if I find one of these images from the middle of the eclipse, here's one here, and I just drag that FITS file right into JS9, it appears. And you can then begin to colorize it and do all the things that your students learn to do. And there were some really nice sunspots during that eclipse that kids can measure using some of these tools. And we'll talk about all these things in future MicroObservatory Mondays. So I wanted to give you something to look forward to. Thank you all for coming. We really encourage you to implement. Erica can help you get accounts for a new group of students, help you get started, and we look forward to your implementation. So with that,